This video is going to be about how to use your TI calculator to find critical values for the chi-square distribution. This is a little bit more complicated than the other critical values that we've had to find. So first of all, what we're going to use for this is the solver. On some of your calculators, it will call it the numeric solver. To get to that, press your math button and just press the up arrow, which will take you to the bottom of the list. Here it should say either solver or numeric solver. So then press enter. I'm going to go through this first with an older model of the TI-84. So this would be the screen that you would see come up in an older model. What we're going to do is put an equation in here involving the chi-square distribution that the calculator is going to solve for us. So here we're going to put in the Chi-Squared Cdf function. To get to that, we go to the same distribution menu that we've used before. So we press second and the bars key. And what we're looking for is Chi-Squared Cdf. You may be able to see it on your screen. If you can't, just scroll down and it should be the next one under Chi-Squared PDF. Make sure that you are using Chi-Squared Cdf and not Chi-Squared PDF. Once you have found it and have it highlighted, then press enter. So if this screen comes up, then we're going to put in a lower bound, an upper bound, and a degrees of freedom, just like you would have done in the TCDF function. So we want to put in lower bound of 0. Our upper bound for this is going to be x. This is the number that we're actually trying to find. So to get x, use this key right here underneath the mode button, the one that says x, t, theta, n. And then for degrees of freedom, this depends on your sample size. In the example I'm doing, the sample size was 19. The degrees of freedom is 1 less than that, so I'm putting in 18. And then I'm going to enter until it takes me back to the previous screen. Now I have my chi-squared function in here, and I have the 0, x, and 18. Now I also have to put in one more thing, and that is I have to subtract the area that I'm looking for. So this is the alpha over 2. So in the example I'm going to do, our alpha was 0.05, so I'm going to put in 0.025. So, and keep in mind this has to be a minus. So the two things that you can change in this are the degrees of freedom, which goes right here, and the area, which goes right here. Once you have this in here, then press enter. This should take you to a screen like this, and just so that you know that it has actually calculated the value you want, at this point you have to do one more thing, and that's press alpha and enter. This tells your calculator to actually solve it. Okay, so the number right here after the x equals, that is our critical value. So this would be the critical value for an area of 0.025. Now for chi-squared critical values, we actually have to find 2 of them, and we have to do that separately. So now we want to go back to the previous screen. To get there, just press the up arrow. And all we're going to change here is the area. So the first one that we can put in is actually the alpha over 2. The next one that we're going to put in is 1 minus that number. So if we do 1 minus 0.025, we would get 0.975. So all I'm doing is changing that to 0.975, and then I'm going to do enter. And notice here it didn't recalculate yet, so I have to do alpha and enter, and that will tell it to recalculate. So here's our other critical value. So the 2 values that we found were for 18 degrees of freedom and a 95% confidence interval. So our alpha was 0.05. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like with a newer model calculator, since it's a little bit different. So we're going to do the same thing with this one to start. We want to find that solver function. So I'm pressing the math button, using my up arrow, and there's my solver. So I'm pressing enter. The screen looks a little bit different. So what we need to do here is put 0 in this first box, and then enter, and that'll take us down to the second box. And here we have to put in that Chi-Squared Cdf function. So I'm going to go to my distribution menu by pressing second and vars. And the Chi-Squared Cdf is number 8 on the list. And again, make sure you use the CDF and not the PDF. So I can either press 8 or I can just scroll down to that function and press enter. This will take me to this Chi-Squared Cdf screen. So for the lower bound, I want to put in 0. For the upper bound, I'm putting in x. And again, that's to get x, use this xt theta n button right here. My degrees of freedom is 1 less than my sample size. In the example I'm doing, it's 18. And then I'm going to enter twice so that it takes me back to this screen. Now I still have to put in the minus area part. So after all of this, I'm putting in minus and then my area. So the first one I'm going to do is the alpha over 2 for the area. So if our alpha was 0.05, our alpha over 2 would be 0.025. Then I'm going to enter. And again, to make sure that this is calculating my value, once I get to this screen, I have to do alpha and then enter. Now, if I want to find another critical value, so if I wanted to find the one on the other side, then I'm going to use my up arrow to go back to this screen. And all I'm going to do here is change my area. So again, this one was alpha over 2. The other one I need to do is 1 minus alpha over 2. So in this example, that would be 0.975. So I'm only changing that. I'm doing enter. Notice here it hasn't recalculated my value, so I have to do alpha, enter. Now it has recalculated my value. So my second critical value is this one, the 31.526. Now if I want to come back to this later and do critical values for some other situations, I can just go back to my solver. So I do math and the solver, and it should already have the 0 here, and it should have my function down here. So for example, if I were doing a different problem, the only things that I would want to change would be the degrees of freedom and the area. Don't change the distribution function that's here or the 0 or the x. Just leave those alone. So let's say I was doing a problem where the degrees of freedom was 10. I could put the 10 in there, and let's say my alpha was 10%. That would mean half of alpha would be 0.05. So to do my first critical value, I would put 0.05 in for the area. Then I'm going to press enter. And again, it hasn't recalculated. This is the value we had from the last problem. So to get it to recalculate, I'm going to press alpha and enter. So there's my first critical value. To get my other one for this problem, I'm going to press the up arrow to go back. And this time, the only thing I'm changing is the area. So the one I had here was the alpha over 2. For the other side, I want to do 1 minus that number. So 1 minus 0.05 would be 0.95. So I'm only changing that. Then I'm doing enter, and then alpha, enter. There's my second critical value.